Well, I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning. Folks aren't tuning in, but I'm going to go ahead and record a message for everybody that I'll put on Facebook. We're at a very transitional time. It's Friday the 13th of 2020. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, which is an interesting time. It's Mother Earth is, asking us as the two-leggeds to slow down and to contemplate our path, how we are sharing the earth. And so hopefully everyone is taking advantage of this time for more introspection and time with those that we're closest to, our family pods. I want to offer prayer this morning, give gratitude for a new dawn, give gratitude to the ancestors who shared life with us and give us life. Gratitude that the Creator brought me to this sacred place and tasked me with the responsibility of creating a ceremonial place dedicated to the unity of all life. And that's what we're looking at today. That's what I've been working on most of my life. I thought it would take 10 years, but we're going into year 20. And, for a lot of construction projects, especially a collective manifestation of a dream of many people, Suscol House has the support of people all over the world. My friends from East Africa and Mexico and Peru, from New Zealand, the Maoris from Aotearoa. A lot of people have come and said prayers and touched the earth in this sacred place. Behind me is the Arbor. This was in the springtime. The flowers don't always bloom like this there, but after particularly wet winters, we were able to capture these they're early summer flowers that bloom in early June. And our ceremonial arbor is a circle. A circle is representing that all life is connected and that we believe that things end how they started. So when we started this, we started in prayer. We asked permission of the ancestors. And actually, I'd received directions from Jenny Marufo, was one of the last full-blooded Onisati people to the Napa Valley. I was fortunate enough to meet her back in 1986 and travel with her, and she gathered many, many people from around the state of California and took us all to all these really remote rancherias and reservations, and we were always in ceremony. She was waking back the California spirit after the European invasions. She came down and helped us. So I was offering a prayer of gratitude, for another day on this beautiful earth, and prayers of gratitude to our ancestors who give us life. Without their gift of passing life on, we wouldn't be here. Giving gratitude to Jenny Marufo, and I'm pictured behind me is the ceremonial arbor, Suscol House. And I was given the honored responsibility to create a sacred place, for Indigenous people to gather in ceremony. And we dedicated it to the unity of all life. Jenny Marufo was a California Onisati woman. She was one of the last surviving full-blood Onisati. I knew her and her aunt, Laura Summersall, were still living in. In 1986, she started gathering Native people together that were awoken, people that had their intuition awoken and were doing work, and fortunately I got invited into that circle. And so she was traveling, she was gathering all the people that were in California, and we were going on road trips for 3 years. We used to go almost every month or two to different remote rancherias and reservations, and she brought us together in ceremony and harmony. And she was telling us over and over, the crucial message that we were all being given was that it was time to wake up. It was time to come out of hiding. And people like myself, I was considered like one of the lost children because my grandparents were taken as babies, from their place of origin. So they were forcefully assimilated. So, I was an assimilated person, or what they referred to as a lost. one of the lost children, because we were separated from our culture and our families. But fortunately, we made our way home. I always used to say, if you came in and you killed someone's parents and their teachers and you ran them and moved them far from their home, how long would it take people to get home? How long would it take the child to return home? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize I was talking about myself. I thought I was talking more about the California Native people because it was the third generation from the massacres and relocations, forced relocations that in 1986, that was that third generation. There were people my age at the time. I was about 40. And Marufo was bringing us all together. It was a lot of people in my age group. And those people in the circle, I think it was about 100 of us that used to meet like every other month or something, and sometimes monthly, but for days at a time, and ceremony and talking circles. And she was just saying, time to wake up. It's time. We can't be afraid anymore. We can't be hiding. So she would say, I think at the first gathering we had at Grindstone, which was beautiful. For me, it was amazing just to be in ceremony in a roundhouse for 4 days with all these just amazing, wonderful people. And saying to her as we were walking from the kitchen back to the roundhouse, I said, I don't want to go home. I just want to stay here like this. And she goes, oh, we all want to stay here. And then she was doing the blessing for that morning. And she said, we're all so happy to be together with people that are kind and loving and awakened. And she said, we don't want to go home, but we have to. And she said, it's really rare for people, the medicine people, to gather. They wouldn't traditionally have gathered like this all together, but she said, we have to support ourselves. And it's a responsibility of everyone here to go home and to do the work where you live, to help the people wake up, to start the prayers all over California again. Mm. And then one of the elders had been there in ceremony with us, a really beautiful old woman from the coast. She was old at the time. I think she was in her late 70s, about my age now, but she seems old, which I seem old now too. But she had memory of when the Europeans came. She was on the coast, she remembered, and she had shared that story. She was 13 years old, and she said the way they would refer them to them all the time, I saw the elders would refer to them as the others. The others, they came. And they looked at them because they couldn't understand what they were. The way they were dressed and the way they behaved was so different. But so she was there as a young teenager during the transition times, and she said never before have people gathered like this, where all the medicine people would gather in one place. Mm-hmm. And it's time to wake up, to gather again, like we were. She said it hasn't been that long. I was a little girl when this happened, and now I'm an old woman, but I'm so grateful that I've lived to see the reawakening of the people. Because all the tribes, when you translate the name of the tribal names, it always, how you translate it is the people, the humans. That's what it translates to. So when we say the people, a lot of Native people, especially the older people, they'll still talk about the others. That's all they say when the others came. And then they talk about the people. So when they say the people, it means the tribal people. So that was a really beautiful ceremony. And what Jenny had said at the end of the 4 days we were together, that we might not ever see each other again, but that you're not alone, that none of us are alone, that we're all connected together. And so we will all accept responsibility to serve the people where we are, because the people are sick, and it's hard work, but remember, you're not alone. And then that was the first gathering, and like I said, we continued to gather for 3 more years before she unfortunately she passed away. It was really, really sad for everybody when that happened. And we had been down on Sinkion. It was one of the larger tribes, the gaming tribes. The tribes were just starting to have casinos in the early 80s. And we were at a really large gathering at one of the bigger casinos. And it had been beautiful. gathering. By that time, we were all really good friends, and when we would come together, we would be very happy to be together, sharing songs and food and stories. Um, and she unfortunately had a massive heart attack right after everybody was going home. She passed away. But I continue still to work with her children. Her surviving daughter is one of our cultural advisors, and she lives over at the Sonoma Coast, and we still work together and see each other once or twice a month. Um, but we started to go around, some of us that became closer friends, because then when Jenny passed, we still gathered a few times without her, but her loving, she was so generous and loving, that connecting force that we all started to take our tasks. And from those groups of people, all those men and women, and I think it was pretty even balance, men and women, everybody did accept responsibility. And those are people, most of them now, half of them have passed away, but for many, many years, we would still see each other maybe once or twice a year. But we all accepted the responsibility to becoming leaders in our communities where we lived, and saying the prayers and bringing the songs. So the ancestors of this land, the Onisati people, the spirits that have crossed over, you sing for them, and that helps them, in their spiritual realm. And then by accepting that responsibility, it helps us. So I would talk with some of the different people. What could we do? We were urbanized, assimilated people. What could we do for the people? Because traveling to all those rancherias, we saw how destitute the people were in the 80s. And so I was asking, what can we do? Some of the other urban Indians from Sacramento and San Francisco were asking the same question. What can we do to help the people in these remote, isolated places? And what we came up with was, for us, for me, I had a vision, I had a dream. I felt a calling at one of those gatherings. We were in this really poor place, and it was a roundhouse that had just been neglected for, quite a long time. And then it had been revived, and that was, we were in the circle, and there's a fire in the middle, and the dark, just a hole at the top and no windows. So the sun just comes through that hole. And the sun had come on me, and I just felt this really strong voice that said, take the circle home. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll take the circle of love home. And then I heard, take the circle home. I don't know how it is for you, Deborah, but when you hear that voice, it keeps repeating itself. It means I haven't gotten the right understanding of it. And so I can take the circle of love, and then to take the circle home. And then I opened my eyes, and I thought, you mean this building? I could build a building like this, and then take this circle home. I said, I'm supposed to take all these people, because it was over 100 people, and love was pretty rough. And I thought, I'm supposed to take all these people home. And it said, take the circle home. And I realized it was that circle of love and the circle of ceremony to start the prayers in that traditional way again here in Napa, really where we were living, which is what Jenny was telling us all the time, take the responsibility for where we lived. And I thought, oh, okay, I have a lot of friends who have property, and I'll just have this. They said, no, it belong to no one. It belong to no one. And so I thought, So it took a couple of years to figure out, but we did eventually, and we realized, okay, we have to develop an organization, which at that time I was in my young 40s, and that's, I didn't know how much responsibility it was. I probably wouldn't have done it had I known. But I just thought, okay. And so just one step at a time, we set up a 501c3, and we purchased the land. We've just moved forward since then, offering prayers and ceremony. And even though, like I was saying yesterday, there's not a lot of people that gather at Suscol House, but it's because of YouTube and Facebook, we've been able to share this virtually since we started, really. In 1998, we purchased the land, and we've been able to share it with people. And other people immediately started emulating it. We thought at first, we imagined it when we were dreaming it, that we would buy the land, we'd build a house and have camping, and people would come and stay there, and then they would have inspired, and they'd go home and make their own camp. But what happened as soon as we purchased the land, that was such an unusual thing for a group of Indian people to buy land back. It just kind of sent a shockwave through the whole California community and really around the world. Like our friends in the Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Maoris, they were just like, yeah, that's what you have to do. And our friends in East Africa and Mexico, they're like, oh, you bought a place. And then it wasn't just land, it was the richest, one of the richest places in the country for us to be so bold. But immediately in Lake County, the tribes there thought, oh, those people think they're so smart. They're going around telling everybody how they bought 20 acres. We bought 90 acres. We went out and bought 90 acres. And I was just like, so what happened was spontaneously just people started doing just replicating idea. And a lot of the tribes started to repurchase. Of course, the southern tribes in Southern California were much wealthier, the casino tribes. So now, in the year 2020, those tribes, the southern tribes and the Lake County tribes, most of the Lake County tribes have repurchased their traditional territories, and then they've incorporated into the rancherias and become reservations. Because the difference between a rancheria and a reservation, which is California is the only state that says rancherias, but that's under 100 acres. If the tribe has under 100 acres, it's a rancheria. It's a small ranch. If it's over 100 acres, then it's a reservation. And so most of the, what we call, you know, in the outside world, that we call them all reservations, but most of them are rancherias until the last 15 years. And the tribe started repurchasing. So in Southern California, San Juan and Toledo, the large casino tribes, they repurchased their own tribal territories. But now what they've started doing, which is really pretty amazing and wonderful, is they've repurchasing like east of San Diego and south of Bakersfield to Mexico and the Arizona border. The tribes have repurchased the whole southeastern part of California. That is all becoming tribal land. So that's a, you know, it's just a wonderful thing. And it's a wonderful story of resiliency and healing and health. And there's so many people who had hope for our project, but there's a lot of people who have been against it. And a lot of people who just wanted us to fail and try to do things to help us fail. Especially, you know, against me personally, which is a hard thing. But, you know, mostly you just persevere. And like the elder said, you know, Jenny Marufo's husband, Butch Marufo, he stayed alive. He passed away, I think about 20 years ago. So that was, you know, he stayed around and was a really good mentor and a wonderful, wonderful friend to me for, you know, another 15 years. And Jim Big Bear King was another elder that mentored me for 15 years. He lived here in Napa. And he really was my mentor, helped me deal with the FBI and the local police and the fire department. And then when I started to travel internationally, we had to interface with we didn't have to, they interfaced with us, the CIA and all of those people. And then also just the troubled Native people, because there's a thing called lateral violence, and that's people that have been oppressed so deeply that they hate themselves, and then they hate others that are like them. So of course, you know, as a woman of color, as a assimilated, urbanized Indian woman, you know, I just had a lot of things that people could attack me about. And mostly, you know, if you're strong, you just let that roll off. Probably most people know about projection and understand that people that are afraid or lack self-confidence will project their negative aspects onto another person. And the easiest person to project it to is a person that's standing up. Fortunately, in the California world and in my family, my tribe, I'm a descendant of the Towa people native to New Mexico. And my family was matrilineal, still is matrilineal. And the land grant that my mother and her sisters were heir to went to the oldest sister. And in New Mexico and Arizona, for the Dene people and what are called the Pueblo or the Towa, the Tiwa people, the matrilineal people, the land belongs to the woman. And when the woman marries, the husband still lives with the mother. And so it passes along, the woman is the one who takes care of the land. So for me to, you know, kind of rise up and accept the responsibility from a medicine woman, saying to us, rise up and, you know, take your responsibility. And then to say, well, I could do this. And then fortunately, the Pomos, a lot of the Pomo people that are my buddies and friends, they're matrilineal too. So when I was having to deal with the Apache, some of the other tribes that were patriarchal, they would just say, what's the problem? They were used to women being in charge and women being, usually it would have been a council. It would be a council of grandmothers that would be, helping to guide the tribe. Because in California, the tribes they weren't warlike at all. There was enough food and water. So they were very generous. They were very communicative. They had lots and lots of ways of resolving conflict and communicating when there was a state of conflict, and passive ways of establishing boundaries and respecting each other's boundaries, and always very, very generous, sharing. And so to share and to respect the women, it was a council of grandmothers that guided the people. It wasn't like leading them or telling them what to do. There wasn't that sense of commanding somebody. Was really foreign. And still is a lot for the Native people. It was when the Euro invaders came and they said, tell us who your leader is. And they wanted to see a man. And the tribes did have a spokesman. They called him the spokesman. And the man would go and talk and say, there was a ceremony, he would be the one talking. But I saw that in the Dene people, because my tribe, we were urbanized. So, and our family moved to California in the early 50s. So I wasn't around the Towa and the Tewa and the Tiwa people, the Pueblo people, except visually in my early childhood. But in my adult life, I spent a lot of time around the Dene people, who are matrilineal also. Dene are referred to as the Navajo and the Pomos. So it would be a council of grandmothers, and then in the ceremony, the spokesman would stand up and be talking, but he would be looking, and maybe the grandmother would go like that, or just like this, come over here, and then go, that's not what we meant. We meant this. And so then he would go and restate it. And I was saying this one time to the Elks Club. They had asked me, I used to go to the Elks Club a lot and talk, and they'd like to hear me talk in the beginning, in the old days. And I would tell them, because they would want to know, where's the medicine man? Who's the chief? And I'd say, well, the California tribes didn't have a chief. And they would have a circle of grandmothers that were guiding the tribe, but there would be the spokesman saying what the grandmothers would tell them to say. And then all these old white guys, they're like, yeah, it doesn't seem like things have changed much. They all agreed that they did what their wives told them to do, even though they would be in these clubs and organizations, that they're still following the lead. So, of course, we believe that it's more natural. Because they say when a woman's needs are taken care of, the whole village thrives. When you meet the needs of a man, the man thrives, and maybe his family thrives. But if it's a woman, the whole village is cared for, and that we just, for whatever reasons, we think more inclusively. So I feel very honored and blessed. This life has been a wonderful life. And this has been a really interesting time with the pandemic that we've had. The earth has given us time to calm down and sit quiet and contemplate. And I just contemplated in gratitude. But it's given us time to reflect. And then a lot of projects that I've had, like putting together a history of what we've done the last 20 years. That's what we showed yesterday. And that's what's streaming on Facebook. And we'll keep it streaming as long as people like it and share it. It'll keep going. And then we'll convert it at some point to YouTube, along with these little discussions. So I wanted, because there's only two of us, I thought that this would be a small group, that we could have a discussion. If you have questions or comments, let's have a... And the dream I had last night, I couldn't go to sleep because I was so wired from that kickoff. And May, our staff person, she's worked so hard at the technical aspects of putting this together. And so she was so wired yesterday that everything was going okay. The site went up, and there was a few glitches, but she caught them right away. And then the kickoff went really smoothly, and it kept streaming all day. It's still streaming today. And then I got on, and so she was real excited. So I was really wired, and I couldn't go to sleep last night, but I finally did. And then I went into some very deep and very beautiful, sweet dreams. I really was dreaming I was with my Pomo friends, who we don't get to see each other that much because we're all busy, and now we're older, so none of us really want to travel around like we used to. We used to just be on the road all the time. We'd always be together, and now, like, I want to know if I'm going to go someplace, where are we going to eat, and where am I going to sleep, and how far is it from the bathroom? So I really, I'm just more like wanting, but last night I had a sweet dream of being with a lot of my Pomo friends. We were sitting around the fire, and we were just talking, and we were so grateful for the lives that we've had each other to support each other, and that we're still, the ones I met last night were all in the living world. And so we were just glad that we're still here together. And then the end of my dream, I was with a lot of my male friends from Napa. I've had a lot of really bright, when I first came here in 1972, we were, of course, hitchhiking around as hippies. I'd been living on the road for almost 2 years, traveling around Western Europe, Mexico, and the whole West Coast, which everybody was doing back then in the early 70s. And I moved from San Francisco to Napa, and we fell in with this really wonderful group of people that had done the same thing. They had gone off, they'd gone to Canada, they'd gone to Europe or Mexico, and then they were all coming home back to Napa. And that was the time that we moved to Napa, so 1972. So we locked into this group of people that grew up here and went to school together. And those people are still my friends from that old, the ones that are still living. Of course, the ones across our homes, still friends with them too. But I had a beautiful dream of being with those men that were very supportive of me. When I split up with the kid's dad, I went through some toxic times, and the men in that circle, those kind of hippie men, male friends, they just really put themselves around me like dolphins do or something. And they protected me because back then the police wouldn't come when you were having domestic problems. And I always have felt very grateful because I had babies, 2 babies, and I didn't ever have to deal with it. This one man just said, I heard there's a problem and we're going to take care of it. And they took the kid's dad and they just babysat him. They took him away and passed him away like you would a little baby. And that was in what would that have been? 1978, 76. And so that was really heroic of them to do that. It wasn't, and it spared me a lot of grief. And so that circle of men have always been my lifelong friends. So in my dream last night, we were together and talking, and this one guy, we were just happy. I think we were happy that in the life we've spent, even though again we don't see each other very much. I haven't seen him probably in 2 years, but in this dream we had come together and we were going to go on a little trip. And he said, this has been so good. This has been so good. And it was just like with the circle of women I was talking with, we were saying the same thing. We were saying, this has been so good. This has been so good. We were just really in a dream state, gratitude of the lives that we've had the opportunity to live. I feel very fortunate to live, surrounded by love of so many people.
It is wonderful, and I'm sure that you are. And the project, I think, is absolutely heroic. Hi, Lindsay. Unfortunately, I have to leave in a couple of minutes for a client to see. But I just wanted to say on the lateral violence, it sounds like you're talking about internalized depression.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different words for that. They call it projection, internalized racism, internalized depression, self-abuse.
Can be lethal, really, really damaging. But wonderful to hear this lineage again, and the story and the history in many pieces I haven't heard before. So thank you for bringing this.
Yeah, and I thought we thought these chats would be 20 to 30 minutes. We weren't sure how they would go. The next 2 chats that are coming up, especially the one next week, is the youth chat, and that one's going to be very exciting. Macaw Blue they've put together a beautiful script. I was just going to be kind of a short, okay, let's keep this going chat today.
Great.
Thank you, Deborah. So we need to get together. Lindsay, did you want to say something? I'm going to stay talking because I was going to record. I wanted it to be about 20 minutes.
I'll stick with you. I didn't come on the video earlier because I didn't want to be a distraction. I got in late because just dealing with my technology here. But I really appreciate hearing the story. And I mean, I've followed the Suscol House for the last 5 or 6 years since I moved to Napa 7 years ago. So hearing kind of the origins from you is really special.
Thank you.
And I live on the land, and I have a very deep connection with the land where we live. And the land has so many stories, obviously, that go far beyond each individual person's experience. And I think that your work is honoring those thousands of years that have come before. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Well, thank you. I recognize your name. Were you in the cohorts with us?
I'm sorry? No, I'm starting in January.
Okay, I put a cough drop in my mouth and all of a sudden it was, usually makes it so I can drink. Oh, that's great. Because I know that we've been communicating and that's why I was trying to place you. I thought when I see your face, I don't recognize you, but I recognized your name right away when you came in.
Yeah.
I thought you were an older woman. The cohorts have gone really, really well. And that's something we wanted to do something similar to that. And I realized when what we needed was money because we really needed paid staff. It was fun. I don't want to make it seem like it was difficult and then it wasn't fun. It was a really challenging but very engaging task. And everybody that came together for that was really grateful to be a part of it. Because we had 5 cultural advisors. The one woman I was talking about, who's the daughter of the medicine woman I was talking about, Jenny Marufo, she and her husband were part of the cultural advisors. And then a lot of the people that mentored me and helped me and worked with me, they've passed on, they're not here anymore. So it was nice to pull together some younger people and then actually I think I was the oldest. I'm the oldest one in that circle now, but which is funny. But there was 5 cultural advisors, and so we created a curriculum, and it took us 15 months to develop it. We were developing it as we were teaching it. Mm-hmm. With the 6 cohorts that you're going to be a part of, it'll be the 6th time we're doing the presentation. Yeah. So it's been good, but it took a lot of effort. And I used to think about, I want to do this, but then I realized, no, it took a huge, hard focus. And it was good to have a budget where the people were all being paid. There was 3 of us working full-time on it for, I think it took us about 4 months to develop the curriculum. Yeah. And then the cultural advisors were being paid for their travel time and food and the day. We met a whole day once a month. Yeah.
In the beginning, were they in person?
They were all in person. Yeah, because when we started it, we did the first 3 cohorts, which were part of the contract, was the contract that we had with the county mental health services. We were mental health providers. They were all in person. I know it's funny how we adapted so quickly to the pandemic, because now sometimes if I was seeing a movie, because I don't watch TV, but now I have started watching it, Netflix and stuff. But when I first would see it, I'd see people without masks and I'd think they're not wearing their masks. And I was, oh yeah. So we started this program now. We're in the 4th year. Yeah. So we started it and we would meet physically, because when I was conceiving it and putting the program together, I was getting advice from people and feedback from people. Then I submitted it to the county and the county accepted it, submitted it to the state. And, it takes almost 2 years when people always think, you just get that money and mistreat it. And I'm like, whatever. It takes a long time. So it was a 2-year process just to secure the funding. And then it was another 15 months to kind of secure and lock down because the first few groups we were wanting feedback. Mm-hmm. They didn't make any changes so we didn't really change anything. From the curriculum we developed, part of what we were doing is putting it through the lens of trauma specialists, mental health providers, mm-hmm. mental health dollars. So it had to have that component to it. And then we said that, was this too traumatic to present to the general public? And the 90 people that were part of those first 3 cohorts, they universally said, no, it was good. And they thought it was really important information that the people living here should have. Mm-hmm. And then now that we allow kind of lay people, not therapists, they're really grateful to see it, because we've had to go, I think it was the 4th cohort, we had the first class in person, and then we had to adapt to Zoom, which we did in like 4 days when the shut down. We were ready to give the workshop and we thought, oh my God. But it took us 4 days. We got it up on Zoom and everybody learned how to use Zoom. And now the last 2 cohorts we've done on Zoom. And that actually is we miss being together and having all the networking and talking that goes on. But what happened is people are with their families, and husbands and wives can watch it together. And there's been a lot of gratitude. Some people have invited their neighbors to come. And so then people have people to process and talk about it with.
Yeah.
So that's been beneficial. And then people have had their children there too. This last cohort, I think there was about 7 kids, little kids, like under like 11, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, the idea of going home when you found a space where you connected in a certain way to people, then going home alone can be challenging.
Right. And that's what people said in the first cohorts. They mentioned one woman had said that her 11-year-old daughter would wait every day for her to come home and said, Mom, what did you learn today? She really wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of the couples, you know, men and women would share that they were sharing with their partners. One of our advisors, she's an analysis, she actually came to the 3rd workshop. And then in the last workshop we just finished, she was with her husband and her 2 adolescent children. And she said that just felt so much more safe because she was in her home with her family. They were hearing the information. They could immediately process it together and then continue to process it through the month. And we really have set this 1 workshop a month because the information is so traumatic. People need time to process it.
Yeah.
And sometimes people come to 3 workshops and then they can't come anymore. And the feedback we get that it was too difficult. They wanted to know, but they couldn't come anymore.
Yeah.
Too bad. But mostly people say, people need to know. There was one guy who signed up 3 times. He really wanted to be there, but he could come to 1 workshop and tried to come to the first one, and then the second one, you know, but almost like 6 months apart. But hopefully at one point we'll get it up on YouTube so people can go back to it. It's a huge amount of information.
Do you have a maximum number of people who can join?
I think because it's on Zoom, I think we can go up to 60.
Yeah.
I think this last workshop, there was almost, I know there's a little feedback, I don't know why. There's almost 50 people, but like I said, there was groups. There was a couple of family groups that were 4 or 5 people. So if there's only 1 computer, it's less numbers. We're thinking about setting up a program, which we haven't yet, where we can have 1,000 people on a group, because that's sort of commercial size. I was looking to that. You know, we've been looking to do webinars and now this kickoff that we're doing, we're actually getting feedback from across the country, that's what we had hoped for.
Yeah.
So, but right now, I think I don't give us a capacity, but we just managing numbers, it's about 50 right now.
Yeah.
So I think we have about 15 people signed up. And when we were doing the sit-in workshops with people coming, we cut off at 30. But most of those groups, they would be 30 that would sign up, and then it would kind of come down to 20 that really stayed through.
Yeah. How do you manage people when, I mean, imagine in person, there are people who are very upset, and
it's okay, because just like now how Ice is crying to tell the stories, especially the first cohort, we had just put all this information together and we were delivering it. So especially me, when I was doing the presentations, I would just be crying through the presentation. It's a long time ago that you can still talk. You know, when people start to cry, they stop talking. And the only reason you can't talk when you're crying is because you stop talking. You try to stop yourself crying. But if you just let yourself cry, you can keep talking.
Yeah.
So a lot of times in the first workshops, we all were just crying. We'd just be crying. And then I remember this one workshop that was particularly difficult, the first cohort. This one young man, he couldn't stop crying. You know, when we had the break afterwards, we would have a break, and then there was we would share food. We had like brunch and coffee and everything. That's the other part of the Zoom. We don't have that time to hang out. And then we go into the healing element during that break time, which was about 15 minutes. He just couldn't stop crying. And he kept apologizing. He said, "I'm sorry." I said, and everybody said the same thing. "You don't have to be sorry. It's a really sad story." And we said, "You know, if you were crying, it would be weird." And one of my friends, we had 3 therapists who were consulting, like when we did the survey, and then they were giving us really professional advice. We were meeting, and one of my friends, who's a Dene, so she's a Native person who knew the stories, but she had told me later, because she was doing the analysis, we sat and talked for a few hours. So I had questions to ask her, but the first 3 groups had a bunch of questions. They had a survey before and a survey after, and then there was a survey questions that we put out to the community. So that was a lot of surveys that now, because this is part of, it's not the same analysis. There's a pre and post test at the beginning of the series and at the end. It's not that real intense. What did you think? Like about a 10-minute survey. But she said, well, when you did the workshop, she said, I know you said the first one, this wasn't hard, it was an overview, but she said for her, it was really hard. And she said, it's easier when I was giving it and I was crying because it was so sad. She said she felt like when I was crying, that gave everybody permission to cry. Mm-hmm. So people would just be weeping softly. Nobody was like, woo-hoo. Although I think in a few of the breaks, people did go into the bathrooms and cry a lot. Like that one young man, he was crying. Nobody told him to stop crying. The people that were with him, they just sat with him. There was about 3 or 4 of us. And then like he was apologizing about he couldn't stop. I just sat down with him. We just sat with him. And we just cried. We thought it was a really sad story. And a lot of the people in the first 3 cohorts were from El Salvador and Mexico. So for them, the stories we were telling were stories that they had experienced. Mm-hmm. They were living it. One woman, it was just this amazing woman. She does an amazing work here in the community. But she said, oh yeah, that's what happened to my mother. She just told the story of her mother, how she got married, which is normal without, those communities to be married around 15 or 16. And her husband used to beat her and rape her. And then the wars came and the police beat her and raped her. And then she had a young baby and she fled on foot and immigrated to California. And then still, even when she got here to Napa, that she, which is amazing story of resiliency, she got married and had 2 more children. Mm-hmm. I think with that much trauma, you would just go, fuck it, don't anybody touch me. And then this woman was just really courageous. She was very articulate and beautiful. She had her master's degree. But she said when she was hearing it, because she wasn't crying, she would just sit there with this look on her face. She felt, and that's what we heard from a lot of the people, they felt very empowered. Mm-hmm. Because they felt, yeah, that's what happened to us. Yeah, that's what it was like. And they were just really empowered to be hearing the story said out loud.
Like a validation of their experiences and their story.
Mm-hmm. And then we bring it to the end is the thrival, and that's what we say, we're still here. Mm-hmm. You saw that kickoff video that we're putting on Facebook, but we have this one video where it's a wedding that we did, and we have a lot of ceremony, but most of the ceremony we don't take pictures of. So the stuff that I'm sharing in that kind of 25-year history, it's about 100 slides. But those are where we had permission to take pictures. And then you have 1,000 pictures and you want to try to pick a story of 25 years. It's really hard to pick out which picture will you put in there to convey, but not get too depressed. And mostly the whole thing about buying the land and developing it, that's been a really joyful experience. And putting those pictures together was really joyful. It was a little sad because half the people are dead, but not that sad, because then I feel like we're living in the dream that we all is still moving forward.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but how was the land selected for Suscol House?
We just were going to buy land. We had initially started out, I think you did miss that part where I was talking about how we had the vision to take the circle home and to place. So if you heard that, initially I thought, I have a lot of friends who own land, we'll just get a little place. And I heard, no, it can't belong to anybody. And I thought, okay. So initially we're going to the state parks like Tobose and Skyline to see if we could get 3 to 20 acres, what we imagined, of unrestricted use. And then that wasn't going to happen. And so person who was there and said, you know, Charlie, they killed us and ran us off. They're not going to give us anything back. We have to buy it. And he was the one who thought we have to buy it. And that's where we kind of, you know, figured it out. We have to become an organization. And so then we just started hooked up with a realtor and just started looking for land. So back then, the land prices had gone really low. It was 1998 that we purchased it. And so we spent 6 months looking, which really isn't that long to look for something. We were imagining something around 250,000, 3 to 20 acres. So I found a really compatible realtor who was just a joy to be around. And so every day she would make listings and I would go through the list of seeing what's getting. So once a week we went out looking at properties. And so after about 6 months, we found 3 places that seemed like something we wanted. And the board and the people that were working together was about 10 of us. And it was right around this time of year, right between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was right before Christmas, I think. And we just came together for a potluck dinner, and then we went on the road to the 3 properties. And we had put a bid on the one that we liked, but that got really complicated. So we lost that. And then this property came up. It just got like 20 acres surrounded by 1,500 acres of wilderness. And so we put a bid in and they accepted it. After that bid went in, I think she got 10 more bids within the hour. And that was back in 1998. You would just take the bid, and if they accepted the bid, you signed papers and it was locked down. Now, it's when you buy a real estate, you put a bid and you just wait till you get the highest bid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's very different. Whereas back then, it was the prices had gone really low, and I had thought this is as low as they're going to get. You know, we got to try to do it now. And just when we purchased it, and property values started doubling within about 3 months. So the property that we purchased, $129,000 for 20 acres, surrounded by 1,500,000 acres of open space, that was doubled within 6 months.
Yeah.
And people were saying, you should sell it. And I was like, well, no. That would come up a few times. But it's worked out as a really good space. There has levelness. The other 2 lands we looked at, they were closer into Napa. And at some point I thought more desirable, but they were steep, and one was a 3-acre base and the other was 11 acres. But both of them didn't have that much level space. Where this is 23 acres. And there's about 6 acres of relatively level land that's really easy to use. And then 2 hills and a little ravine, and then we're, like I said, we're backed. This Arbor is the property, and so those hills that are behind me, that's across the street from us.
Yeah.
So we've got 1,500 acres in front of us, and then it's a wilderness to what is that called? Los Posadas Wilderness. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we were vigorous hikers, you could hike to Los Posadas from the Cesco property.
Yeah. Well, I would love to go sometime. We're on the other side of Las Posadas, so.
Oh, where are you at?
We're on Con Valley Road.
Oh, you're really close. No, we're on the same side.
You think we're on the same side?
Well, Con Valley splits, but if you go 128,
yeah,
we're off 128.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're east of Los Posadas. Like the crow flies, if you were a crow, like from where the Arbor is, what we're looking at here is the west. So if you went, to what would be to the west side, it's as the crow flies, you would be at Los Posadas, but we're east of Los Posadas on Child's Poke Valley Road.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a good space. It's been a really good space, and we use it. I realized when we were doing the interviews yesterday with the board, and then we were taping, so I didn't correct them. But a lot of them, when they were talking about it, they talk about it in the future sense, like when Suscol House is built, we'll do this. We do all that already. Everything we wanted to do, we started doing immediately. Mm-hmm. As we purchased the land, we went out there with the drum and we started drumming and singing, and we built a fire. And so we've been gathering and doing ceremony there since we bought it. And then once it was paid off, we built an outdoor kitchen. And then we're camping out there. We used to camp out there, I think, almost twice a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as we purchased it.
Yeah. And how is it managed in terms of sharing it with other communities?
Well, we don't share so much. Most of it happens. Initially, I thought that people would say, okay, we want to do this. And we'd say, okay. And so it's kind of like a forest ranger thing. Like people would say they want to use it. And somebody from our council would be out there. And sometimes if it's people we know and trust, we'll go out there before they go out just to make sure everything looks straightened up. And then they might go out there and camp overnight, or maybe even be there for 2 or 3 days. And then we go out there before they leave. You know, just like you would with a R&B or something. And then mostly it hasn't been that many people. I remember one elder we had a large gathering out there of about 100 people, which we realized that's too many people. Mostly the groups are 10 to 20, and that seems to be a right size. And that's why we call it Suscol House, because it won't be open to the public. It would be open to the public maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And we always intended it to be kind of a prototype, we call it. So it's an inspiration for other people to use. And I don't know if you were there when I was talking with Deborah, but we imagined that we'd build the house and people would come and stay and tour and then think about it and then go home and maybe but what happened as soon as we purchased the land, people started doing that immediately. Oh, we could do that too. So it started getting replicated just immediately. And that was before Facebook and social media. So it was just from word of mouth that people heard there was a group of Indians that bought the land.
Mm-hmm.
We thought, what? What did you do? And then we could do that too. And I said, yeah, we could do it too. That's what we had thought, that just that thing of reclaiming. And now that's normal, because this was, 25 years ago almost. And things have changed. Fortunately, things have changed a lot for the better, I think, for all of us. That people are self-realized. And I think, because I was an urban Indian, assimilated, I kind of got into the hippie movement. And the hippie movement was really, that's what brought me back to my native roots. Because you're too young, but back in the 60s, late 60s and 70s, the hippies were emulating the native people, the men and women were wearing their hair long and wearing long dresses. But that's what brought me back to my Indian self, and to the Indian community, kind of the hippie movement. The Indians just like that to me. Hey, you come over here. You don't belong over there with them. You come here. And I'm like, oh, okay. And somebody had said to me, one of the guys was kind of getting pissed at me. He said, you just pretended you were a hippie so you wouldn't receive the prejudice the Indian people went through. And I thought, well, no, we were assimilated. I grew up in an urban setting surrounded by mostly non-native people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the opportunity, and that's what we talk about in the cohorts. The first cohort, I talk about that. We talk about like how I came to Napa. We were digging, grinding bowls and arrowheads because that's part of the vineyards back in 1972 is when the vineyards were just starting to take over the land use here. And I would say, where are the Indians? Because we were finding these artifacts. And people, oh, they went north. I said, north where? And they'd be north. I said, what part of north? How far north? Are you talking about Canada? They went north, and it was like nobody wanted to talk about it. And if you found the artifact, don't tell anybody because they'll come and take your land. But I kept asking that question until I found the tribes. And then I found who they were. And they were actually over in Santa Rosa. And then they didn't go north. They were massacred. And then the survivors were on bloody runs, pushed north.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gone to the places. I've done the same thing in Mexico, in East Africa. I went to Afghanistan right after the United States invaded. I'm sort of one of those. Now you can see how I'm old and tired, but when I was younger, if there was a question in my mind, I would just kind of go to find the answer. And I stuff that people didn't do, because people even my age will say, how did you start? And I'm like, I just kept asking until I found where the tribes were.
Yeah.
In Mexico, growing up as a child, and even going to New Mexico now, I don't know if you've ever traveled there.
Yeah.
Arizona, New Mexico, the tribes are very visible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they're desert environments. And so when the Europeans were invading, the native people were already on the water.
Yeah.
they literally just threw rocks and kept the Europeans from the water. So the Europeans had to keep moving.
Yeah.
And where they moved to was California. Well, in California, there's plenty of water. So by the time the Euro invaders got to California, they weren't trying to do treaties. They came with the intention just to kill the people. There was no treaties made with the California tribes. And so that's like, is the oldest continuously inhabited place in North America. And the fact that the people that live here still to this day don't know where the tribes are and don't know any California Indians, that's not an accident. And that's where people, and that's been the harder part of the cohort is a lot of times, it's not the people from Mexico and El Salvador and Guatemala and stuff because they know, but the European descendants, they say, well, how come you didn't do this or you didn't do it right? You know, how come this isn't curriculum at the college? Putting the pressure on me personally, but on us as a species, as an ethnic group. And I'm like, no, we would like it to be there. And what I've had to deal with, you know, for 40 years is people trying to kill me. And most of those people, they're like called the FBI and stuff and the CIA.
I told you this a long time ago when I first called you when I got here 7 years ago. So I live on a ranch that's been in my family for 80 years. And it's a very, very magical piece of land. And
because we were going to try to, you were asking me to come out there.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it's a very spiritual place, and it's interesting because I try to share it as much as possible, but I think a lot of people who live in St. Helena and Napa don't really get it quite like,
oh, no.
You know, they're looking for the pool. So we don't have a pool. But I grew up in Denver, in the house in Denver, Colorado, that used to be, it was the American Indian Movement headquarters through the 70s. And it has a very deep and tragic history of its own in the Native American community. And my dad would tell people stories of what had happened there. And it was incredible how many people didn't believe him, you know, and thought that he was making things up.
Oh no, people say that to me. They don't anymore, but they used to a lot. Oh no, people would get up and walk out of the room and say, "You're delusional. You need to get help."
Mm-hmm. So I think that what you're doing with the cohorts is so incredibly important, and I think telling the story as raw as possible is so important, because people need to hear it. And I believe that the more people who hear it, the more we can begin embracing it. So
I think that the healing, you know, and that's how I've always described it, even from a long time ago, that when there's a wound and it's festering, the body can't heal until it's cleaned out.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought 20 years ago it had cleaned out, but given the last 4 years, oh baby, the only good thing for us people of color have thought, you know, because everybody's like, oh, this is so bad, and we're like, hey, see, we won't clean it up. Because I work for human rights for women and children and for indigenous rights, and people would say, we don't need to do that. It's not like that anymore. And I'd like, maybe for you it's not like that, but it is. And for the people of color, it is. And now with the last administration, there's a lot of people, and this election we just had, those people are still there. And that's where everybody's like, oh, good, it's over. I'm like, no, this isn't over. Because now people have been given permission to speak and to express themselves, and they're expressing, you know, it's fear and loathing. And so that part has to be healed. We're kind of in a civil war. The divide has occurred. But the only way that you can heal is by the circle. It has to be unity.
Yes. Yeah.
Like people like you, an enlightened person, you can stare into the face of somebody that hates you. And that's where people say, why do we even talk to these people? I'm like, hey, if we can't talk to them, who's going to talk to them?
Yeah.
How is it going to change if nobody is reaching out? And with the mascot thing, I don't know if you followed that at all. It was pretty intense. But I knew it would be intense. I didn't anticipate that it would be as intense, I think. I thought, okay, now it's been 20 years. It comes up every 5 years. Now it's ready. And the young people. But it got really ugly. And even when I was reaching out to the Ski Bar mascot group, they asked me to meet with them. And I said, sure. But the people I was working with from the school district, they were like, and I was like, why? I said, I'll call the police if it gets dangerous. Oh, no, you don't have to call the police. And I said, what are you worried about? They thought somehow I'd be co-opted. And I'm like, oh, baby, I'm not going to be co-opted. But even the first time I met with them, because I met with the Save Our Mascot group, I met with them 3 times before the war broke out. You know, we were really attempting to negotiate. But what they wanted to do, their idea of negotiation was that we would let it go.
Yeah.
And our idea of negotiation was that they would let it go.
Yeah.
Because it was the wrong thing. And I said to people, because they said, why are they holding on to it? I said, well, if they don't hold on to it really tight, they'll have to admit, you know, most of those people had graduating class of 1965, or some of the dinners I went to with them, they would all introduce themselves by their graduating class. We're having pizza. We're gathering for pizza, and they say graduating class of 1948. And I'm like, holy crap, these people need to get a life. And I remember saying that to somebody from the school district, and he said, well, you know, they didn't go to college and they didn't leave, so this is their little world. But I remember one dinner I was meeting with them, because the one group I'd met with, they wanted me to meet with a large group, and I said, okay. And when I first came, they kept asking, do you want pizza? I'm like, no, I'm not going to be eating. And when I did start to talk, everybody had their pizzas and their Cokes and everything. There was about 50 of them. And I said, I'm just going to apologize to you. I'm going to share some very difficult information. And I apologize that I'm sharing it while you're eating. And there was this one older woman, you know, and she looked really straight, old white woman. She just put her fork down and folded her hands and sat really calmly. And she came up to me later and she said, thank you. I know that was very hard for you. I said, yeah, I noticed you put your fork down right away. She goes, well, when you apologized, I figured I'm just going to stop eating too. She didn't want to be eating. She thought, well, I was telling her. And then, but that was good because she was really listening.
Mm-hmm.
Even right when I first started to speak. Whereas those other people, they had this idea, oh, I was coming to eat with them and drink beer and have pizza, that I was going to just be one, you know, get along with them. And then they realized, yeah. But when I met with them, I felt sorry for them. That very first meeting, you know, at one point the sun was setting, we've been talking for a long time. And I felt like, and because they were saying, well, could you tell these young people that want to change this, that it's really important to us and it really will hurt us. We don't want to change it. And when they said that, my heart just opened up and I felt deep compassion. I felt like they were on this pier. This big ocean liner was moving off to another ocean and they were just kind of being left behind. I thought, the world doesn't even exist anymore. They don't realize the whole world has changed.
Yeah.
I feel about the people that are really, you know, being very angry right now, that the whole world has changed and the whole world is changing and they don't want it to, but it's too late. It's already changed. It's, you know, it's going to change that. And that's where I was trying to be compassionate. But I know that people were with me when they said, I don't know how you can feel compassion. Because like when we did get into the big public meetings, those were nasty. And some of those people I'd eaten pizza with were just screaming at me. They will still scream at me if they see me now today. But one daughter who became the spokesperson for the movement, she had said, Mom, I don't see how you can like them. Are we going to still need to keep talking to them after this is done? And I said, no, honey, we don't have to do that. But then at the one of the last meetings, it got really nasty. We'd already left, but somebody had filmed it and they were all screaming. And this older woman in the beginning had been very rude and nasty and we had a hard time, but then she'd gone really close to my daughter And she said to my daughter, I just really enjoy meeting with you. Will we still be able to talk and visit when this is over? And my daughter, raised to be polite, said, okay. That's what she asked me later. Are we still going to have to talk to him? I said, no, baby, we don't have to do that. You can say hi, but you don't have to keep meeting with him. But the one video, that one lady was there, and she was probably 80 something, and everybody started screaming. It was really nasty. And then she was just like that. She didn't know which way to go. And my daughter said, oh, when she saw that, she just started crying. And she thought if she would have been there, she would have put her arm around her and just walked her out of there. And she goes, Mom, I felt what you felt. I felt like my heart opened up. And even though I didn't really like this woman, I just cared about her. And she seemed so confused. I just wanted to take her out of there. And I said, yeah, honey, that's exactly what I always was feeling. I always just felt, I didn't feel sorry for him. I just felt compassion. I felt like, oh, these people, you know, things have changed and they don't see that it has.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like when all this nastiness has come up in our country, people are like, where did this come from? I'm like, oh, it didn't come from any place. It was here. It's always been here. And now, and that's people of color go, at least people believe us now. They're not saying that we're crazy and that we're paranoid or we're imagining it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, who was doing it this time was the police, who I had to deal with when, you know, breaking away and wanting to go back to my own tradition. I was having to deal with the police and the army. And people didn't realize, no, when you're out in a remote reservation, you know, who comes is the army. And they come with tanks and helicopters, and they surround you in a remote rural place. And you know, that takes a lot of courage to just go, okay. And that's what people say, how could you, some of my native friends, because I started going into war zones, people say, why would you go there? I said, well, after being on the reservations, those are calmer, you know, because you're dealing with smaller militaries. But anyway, it will take community, it will take us all reaching a place of compassion for each other. You know, we're just one species, and we're a species that's at the risk of annihilation, of self-annihilation. And the rest of the world, because I still am in international communities, with the pandemic, the rest of the world is saying we're not going back. We're going to convert economies to green. We stop doing oil. They're talking about not just, you know, because the United States is one of the only countries that doesn't have universal health care.
Yeah, I know.
They have universal health care. They have a guarantee of house. And now through the pandemic, they have a guaranteed wages.
Mm-hmm.
And they say they're not going to go back to another way, so that everybody will have, you know, access to health care, education, to shelter, and to food.
Mm-hmm.
And those are basic human rights, and clean water and clean air. And the rest of the world is already going there. Mm-hmm. The United States during this pandemic has become very isolated. I was at an international conference, a Zoom conference. I didn't talk, but there was people from around. It was an international conference, so all over the world. And I don't know how many people were listening, and it had to be thousands. But the people that were on the panels talking all day, it was a day-long conference. There was no panelist, no moderator from the United States. Nobody mentioned the United States in an 8-hour meeting. International. Yeah. And that to me was like, oh, baby. They've just kind of turned their backs on us, because it's like people say, well, why would they do that? And I was like, well, it's like if you're throwing up and you've got diarrhea and you're throwing up, everybody's going to look away. They're going to wait till you're past that phase. And I feel like as a country, that's right now, everybody's looking away from us. Okay, guys, but everybody's afraid, you know, because we have this huge military. And so somehow we'll come, I believe that we'll come to reconciliation. of our species, that we are not the dominant species on the earth, and that there's not a dominant race. You know, we're just all one people,
Mhm.
four-leggeds and the winged ones, and all the creatures of the sea and the ocean. And that's what the Arbor is dedicated to, unity of all life. You know, at first we were going to say unity of all tribes. That's how we started. And we thought, well, then that excludes non-tribes. So we thought, well, unity of all people. And then when we were out there, you know, there was the lizards and the coyotes and the hummingbirds. And we thought, oh no, this is about unity of all life and tree people.